This is light work. Come on, spill the tea. Yeah. Ooh.
Hey y'all,
What's good?
I'm Laura.
And I'm Dee. And welcome to Spill the Tea with Laura and Dee.
What's our topic today?
I'm glad you asked. Our Candid Convo for today is the future of home prices in Atlanta, 2025 edition.
California. Hi. That's it.
So, according to Zillow, which we all know how accurate Zillow is, they're forecasting about a 1.5 increase in the median home values from like prior year September to this year September. What are your thoughts?
That's low.
Okay. What is the data telling us?
So if you look at data, one thing a lot of people don't realize is real estate data is actually usually about 3 months behind. So if you're pulling data online or looking at things, you're probably looking at stuff, especially the news. If you're just listening to that, they're usually about 3 months behind. So what we have seen over the years in the Atlanta market, if you look at the median sales price of the Atlanta market, the median sales price is kind of bounced a little bit right there at 400,000.
Right.
There's some areas you can get in under 400. There's some that are a little over 400, but that's our median sales price. And at the beginning of 2024, it was at 385. Right now, it is right back at 400. So if you look through, we've been seeing this number actually since about 2022. And so I really feel like that number, as you kind of go down the months, you see it just stays stagnant. 400, 410, 390. We bounced all the way down to 360 in 2023, bounced back up to 400, bounced back down.
Right.
That number has been so unilateral for a really long time. There are 7 million buyers right now waiting to buy, and that's not just in Atlanta. That's through the United States. I saw a small tick down in interest rates last week, and the market saw a 15% increase in buyers, right? So is it only going to go up 1.5%? I don't think so. I think we'll see that just in the spring this year, because so many people have been waiting to buy a house, waiting for the market to crash. There's a large number of people who think the market was going to crash or who thought the market was going to crash.
Right.
And it just didn't. And it's not going to. And because of that, a lot of people are now jumping in. So I expect to see the typical probably 3% increase in the first 6 months of the year. I think if you're waiting, you're taking a big chance, right? If you're waiting for those interest rates to drop and that's your goal, you're taking a big chance to price yourself out of the market.
Right. So I feel like that's very interesting with the median home price being at about 400,000, because I feel like lately, if you kind of like, because Lexi and I have kind of, passively been looking just to kind of keep an eye on, where the prices are going to be when we actually move. And I've been feeling like that mid to low 300,000 is like almost like what we would feel like is a good deal.
Yeah, yes.
Because and it's like right under that, median home price.
Yeah.
Right.
And so else that I think another number that's important to watch, and that's going to help predict where our market trends are going. So one thing that I do know is we are in an unusual market. We've never been in this market in the history of real estate. So there's nothing to base these predictions on, right? There's no like, okay, this happened, 15 years ago. Here was the outcome. That's not the case anymore. So one of the numbers that I do like to watch is months of supply. Most people don't know the breakdown, but 4 to 5 or less months is considered a seller's market. Obviously, if you have 1 month of supply, meaning if nothing else hit the market, in 1 month everything that was on it would be gone, sold under contract. Obviously, if there's 1 month worth of supplies, which was what we had in 2020, houses are going to go quicker. They're going to go for more. There's less inventory, supply and demand, right? So anything over 7 months worth of inventory is considered a buyer's market. So flip back to 2008, right? There was probably 15 plus months worth of supply in most markets. So that's a really strong buyer's market. That's where your buyers, I have an investor she's been looking for a duplex for 2 years. She won't pull the trigger because she bought 4 duplexes for $100,000 in 2008, $25,000 a unit. Or she bought 2 duplexes, 4 doors, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so she ended up, really dragging her feet right now. We've been looking, and over the last 2 years, her duplexes out in Lawrenceville have gone from $400,000 for a 2-2 on each side up to almost $500,000 in 2 years.
Wow.
So and that's that's what the market's staying stagnant, right? That's where, last year at this time, we had 2.5 months of inventory in January, whereas this month we have 3.4. So we have a
Right.
month worth of inventory more than we had last year. We're about to see a huge influx of buyers come in.
Right.
So no matter what you're looking at, like we've not hit over 4 months of inventory in the
Right.
last 5 years.
Right.
That doesn't seem to be changing, and I don't think we're going to see a shift to anything over 5 months. 5 to 7 months is considered neutral.
Right.
Atlanta's market, you're right at about 3.5 overall. And if you micro it down and look at, Decatur or Alpharetta, that's going to shift a little bit. Decatur may be higher, Alpharetta may be lower, but that number right there, in my opinion, is your most important when trying to predict where's the market headed.
Right. So what do you think is going to happen? So you think the inventory, will it increase as those buyers come in, or will it effectively start to decrease because there's a larger demand?
So I think you're going to see an increase in sellers. So if you look at like the number of new listings, we only saw in the entire FMLS area, we saw 6,500 in December. Obviously, January's numbers aren't out just yet.
Right.
Whereas if we go back and look at January last year, we actually saw 8,600 new listings. Right? So I don't know exactly where we are in January. If you look in December of last year or 2023, we saw 5,265. So we saw a little bit of an increase. And what that is due to, you've got a lot of sellers who want to sell, but don't want to pay the interest rates that we're paying, right?
Right.
After sitting at these interest rates for 2.5 years, buyers are finally conceding, right? Like it's not going back to 2%.
Right.
And so the seller / buyer that's been waiting, we're starting to see more and more and more of them hit the market.
Right.
And we are starting to see a lot more urgency in the market. Right. I had a call yesterday or the beginning of the week from a good friend of mine saying, hey, I've got a client. She's a referral. This person has a $210,000 budget. She cannot spend $1 over that. Like that is her max. She's a single mom. We've talked a lot about her budget and where she is. And, she really wants to spend $200,000. We have found a house. We just put in an offer on the house. It's listed at $220,000. I think $220,000 is too high for the list price.
Right.
It's an REO property, so the banks could start.
Right.
But I do think that's high. I think $210,000 is a great price. But she's like, at $210,000, that puts me $150 more than what I really feel comfortable spending. And unfortunately, her and I are having the hard conversation. Go drive Uber.
Right.
Like if you want to buy a house today, this is what you have to do. And then we're looking at our financials and we're looking at, okay, because she's got her attorney bill. Well, that's only going to last 12 months. Once that's paid off, that's a $500 a month raise.
Right.
Right. So I'm explaining to her what we're walking through, and you see the gears turning. You can see it's frustrating for her, but you can also see the realization that if she doesn't put herself in a bit of an uncomfortable, and I'm saying go in where you can't afford it.
Right.
Right. But if you can squeeze by and make it happen, in 3 years, she's going to be selling that house. And now she's going to have $50,000 to $100,000 to put down.
Right.
And she's going to be able to she's going to be making more money. Her and I are going to probably introduce her to you so that she can make sure she's working through her financials correctly and all of that kind of stuff. And that's just kind of where you are. I mean, I have another client who bought 2 years ago, kind of at the beginning of all of this crazy, because she was being priced out of a rental. She's like, Laura, she and her family had lived in this house for 30 plus years, which means they've paid the mortgage plus some.
Right.
And the landlord was like, sorry, rent's going up. Like, and he should, right? That's his business. I'm not faulting him for that. Like, I think he should. But for them, it was like, well, fuck. Like, where do we go now?
Right.
If they would have bought that house, their rent would have never gone up.
Right.
Over 30 years. And so she sucked it up, buttercup, bought a house in Rome for $190,000 2 summers ago. We're walking into year 3 right now, and we had run the numbers. This house did not have central air or heat. So in Georgia, she's been living like nobody else so that she didn't get priced out of the market, right? And we're seeing a lot of buyers do that. And that's an ugly truth, but your home is the best place for you to raise or save money, in my opinion. So it's a necessary evil.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so I feel like, kind of taking that little bit of discomfort on the front end is really going to end up kind of putting you in a better situation, right? Because it's like, I think Lexi and I ended up moving away from apartments because at that point, I think they were raising our rents.
Correct.
And it was like, okay, well, I mean, by the time they raised the rent, we could actually end up paying a little bit less in mortgage.
Correct.
Right. So we
And
ended
in
up
10 years, your mortgage is still the same.
exactly right. Whereas
Your
the rent
rent
is going to continue to
is
go up.
5% up
Right,
every year.
because we had moved 3 times already, and every time we moved, it was because we're raising the rent. And it's like, well, we don't want to pay that for here, right? So
Right.
it's like, well, I'm kind of tired of saying that, right? So, and then as far as buying houses, I always kind of look at it from the standpoint of like, if you're renting, there's really absolutely no way of getting that money back, right? But if
No.
you're buying, it's like at some point you're going to want to sell that house to go to a bigger house. And it's like, because you've been paying down on the mortgage, right, you're building up some level of equity. And it's like, that's almost your way of getting that money back in a sense.
Well, correct. And there's so many things you can do once you buy, right? After you own your property for, a year and you've owned it on January 1, you've got homestead.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a tax break right there.
Right.
And there's all these different things, again, this is your department, but all the upgrades you do to your house. There's ways you can help offset some of those costs.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you're renting, you're wasting money.
Right.
Period. The end. Maybe you waste money buying a house, right? Maybe you over renovate something, or don't stay there long enough, and you don't get a paycheck at the end.
Right.
But you were still investing in yourself.
Right.
You still weren't throwing the money away. Maybe you didn't get a paycheck because the fees, your real estate fees were there, and you paid some money towards closing to the seller or to the new buyer. So you didn't get a physical check, but the house did make money.
Right.
Right. It did make money. And so that's why that, 5-year mark is kind of important. 3 to 5 years is you're starting to make money. You should get a check in hand. You should be able to cover your fees and go and start looking at the next house.
Right. Exactly. Do you know what time it is?
Is it?
It's time for question quickies.
Yes. What's everybody asking today?
So, first question is, so I guess we kind of answered this a little bit, but will Atlanta home
I can
prices
actually see it. I have my
drop?
glasses on today. No. Over the last 2 years, I've heard from a lot of people, we're going to have a massive crash. This is going to be 08 all over again. No, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of reasons why it's not. The main reason is lenders learned from their mistake.
Right.
Right. They're not lending property or money out for properties that people can't actually pay back. And it's hard to get a loan today.
Right.
It's not an easy process.
Right.
You have to prove yourself in a big way.
Right.
Right. So that's foremost. Number 2, inventory is low. Mm-hmm. You don't see a market crash until you've gone through the seller's market, the neutral market, and you're well into a buyer's market.
Right.
Because even 6 or 7 months worth of inventory is normal.
Right.
Right. Not an abnormal market. And
whereas
so
what we were just looking at was 3. Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Why you're seeing that uptick, and why I don't think we're going to see only 1.5% equity build this year.
Right. Especially if we've got more buyers coming in.
Correct. And so there's that. I used to rely heavily on the movie industry as one of the big draws here in the Atlanta market, and while I still do, I think that's a huge thing for the Atlanta market. I'm interested to see how that shifts with AI. Maybe we don't have as many people; they don't need as much manpower, so you may see a slowdown in that. So you may see, sectors will have a housing market like that,
right?
But we're not going to see a pullback. You may see a small correction, and I'll use Decatur because that's always my favorite city to pick on, just because you have so many flippers in there, right? So you are starting to get a little saturated. Let's actually look at that.
Right.
So if you pull up Decatur in that market, right, and we look at Decatur as a city, and then you look at months worth of supply,
it's actually more.
Decatur is more. It's not
Just
much more. It's 3.8, but it is a little bit more. And that it's more because you have a lot of investors. They're all buying the same price house. They're all flipping the same size house. And they're all doing the same renovation on the inside.
Right.
And so
then
now
it's just more investors coming in to buy those flips.
Correct. There's not a huge...
want to pay full price.
Correct.
And the flippers don't want to take less.
Correct. Now, if you look at days on market, Decatur is 10 days on market longer than the rest of the Atlanta market, right? So Decatur's at 33 days. It's going to take you 33 days if you're priced correctly to potentially find a buyer, whereas the rest of the market's taking 32 days.
Right.
So those little shifts don't change a ton, but it does give you an idea of where the direction of the market's going to be going. And this is something we review weekly, actually probably daily. But
you think there's any pocket of Atlanta that could see maybe stagnant prices, maybe not any kind of drop?
Yeah, I think in areas that you have higher renters, because to your point, investors are who buys,
Mhm.
right? So you got to look at your buyer pool when you're listing a property. All of that goes into play as to how much you're going to get, how many days are going to be on the market,
Right.
how many buyers you're going to have, and all that kind of stuff. So it's, you know,
Right.
understanding that will tell you where. But a price drop, maybe we might see some small corrections, but I think the corrections are almost come to an end.
Right.
I think come 4 weeks from now.
Right. Fair enough. And then we're also coming up on spring, which is
Well,
always
that's
just, you know.
we've seen the spring market start in January. The spring market normally doesn't start until February.
Mhm.
Most buyers and sellers think the spring market is here by April. Most of the time, the spring market is in full swing by March, the end of February.
Right.
So if you want to kind of be a smart buyer and get on the front of that before everybody else is out there, that's a great time to do it. That's when we encourage our clients to get started. Is February? That's kind of gearing towards spring.
Right.
Um,
Might be smart from a flip strategy too.
correct.
Right.
The buyers are still on hold right now. You can
Mhm.
still get some really good deals, right? My
Exactly.
client that's at the $200,000 price point, if she doesn't buy right now, I can't help her in 3 months.
Now, you want to know one thing that always bothers me is when I hear someone saying that they want to move or that they want to buy a house.
Yeah.
And then they'll say something along the lines of, oh, well, you know, I'm going to wait until insert something that implies somewhere near springtime. And I'm always just like, man, I mean, you're paying top dollar. Like,
You are.
Lexi says it a lot too. And she's kind of stopped saying it just
Right.
because she kind of understands now, you know, that spring is really when everybody else also lists
Well,
too.
for some reason, society has planned their entire life around a school schedule, even if they don't have kids.
Right. Well, so for Lexi, it makes sense with her being in the school
Well, she's a
system. But for
teacher.
everyone else, it's like, yeah, I mean, why spring?
Because people don't move their kids. So
Yes,
people
okay,
move
that's
in
a
the
good
spring.
point.
So even if you don't have kids and you're moving
Right.
and you want the biggest buyer pool, it's spring. So no, we're not going to see price drops.
Right.
Good luck. If you
Right.
do call me, I'll eat crow.
LOL. So why are homes in Atlanta so expensive? Is another question we're having.
They're not. Have you watched Christina and Tarek flip in California?
So it's because I think we've also gotten a question of why are houses so cheap in Atlanta, and
Because we're a hidden gem
and
still.
I think the really kind of tells you the demographic of
Sure.
right.
Subjective.
Why are houses so expensive? Oh, well, you live here, right, and you've kind of
Correct.
been raised here,
Correct.
right? Why are houses so cheap? Oh, you from out of town.
Yeah, yesterday I was watching Christina and Tarek on TV. I was working out or whatever,
Mhm.
and they're having like this flip off, right?
Right.
He's remarried. Apparently, she's getting her third divorce. Poor girl.
Oh,
she became
no.
really human on the show last night. I felt really, I was almost crying with her. I was like, oh my God, this poor guy, she's married. She's an ass. But anyway, her and Tarek are doing a flip, and I was killing myself laughing because I guess Tarek hadn't seen, him and his new wife hadn't seen the house, and they're doing this flip off or whatever. And so she was asking for a little bit more time because her and the husband were fighting. And so Tarek was like, sure, but the deal is, since I haven't seen your house, you have to let me see your house. You can have your extra 2 weeks, but you have to let me see the house. And so she's like, fine, but understand it's in a really bad part of town. Like, you're not going to want to come here. And so, of course, I'm watching, doing my arm workouts, listening. And then she starts telling the numbers. In a really bad area of California, a renovated home that's about 1,500 square feet goes for $1.3 million. Atlanta's prices, where the median price point is $400,000, you can get a renovated, really nice home in a good area for $400,000 to $500,000. In the Atlanta market, you're paying triple that.
What now? Basically, to answer that question, houses in Atlanta really aren't that expensive.
They aren't that expensive.
It's really undervalued.
It is very much undervalued for the market. And what you're going to see is, right, the prices are going to go up. We're going to hit California pricing. Then we're going to stay there for a while. And everybody's going to leave Georgia just like they're leaving California. And so you're going to see the markets all change and go. We've got 2 decades before we hit overpriced in Atlanta. It's going to take us, we're not going to go from 500 to 1.5 million overnight.
Right.
And so that's kind of the best projection unless something crazily changes.
Right.
We still are going to have jobs. We are still going to have more land.
Mm-hmm.
We are still going to have cheaper prices over the next 10 years. It's not going to go away.
And Metro Atlanta is just going to expand.
Oh, correct.
It's going to be like, what's it? You know, Duluth was never part of Metro Atlanta,
Will
but
be.
now it's like, oh, well, Duluth's definitely Metro Atlanta.
Totally. I like to say we have the city,
Uh,
we have the suburbs, and then we have the suburbs of the suburbs.
Right.
And then we have the country.
right.
So you have Atlanta, inside 285.
Mm-hmm.
And
ITP.
Yes, ITP. Inside. I am not one of those humans. Then you have OTP, right? The suburbs. So you've got the Alpharettas, the Duluth, the like Cobb County, North Fulton, Gwinnett County. But then you have the suburbs.
Oh, she's got something to say. Yes.
But then you've got the suburbs of the suburbs, right? So you've got your Dallas, you've got your Conyers, you've got your Covington, and those areas are starting to grow. And what's crazy?
Oh, I love Dallas.
Yeah, it's a great city. What's crazy is those little cities are starting to revitalize their little cities. And while we as a city are growing out to them,
right,
they're growing into us.
Mm.
We're going to have we're going to be the next New York is my opinion, because we have so much land.
Right.
And the way the cities have been set up, like New York is just concrete for miles.
Right.
That's going to be Atlanta.
Concrete jungle.
Correct. Except are known as the city of trees.
I was just about to say, we've got so many ordinances. It's so difficult to get rid of a tree.
Yeah. So at least we'll have lots of concrete. I'll ask one more question, but I can't read it.
Yes. Can I go to an open house without a realtor?
That is my favorite question of our whole podcast and my whole life. And literally my favorite question. Yes, you can. So I think that's a great question. I think we should probably do an entire podcast on what the new laws are for buyers and what that looks like. So you can absolutely go to an open house without a realtor. Understand that realtor is hoping to rope you in,
of course,
and hook you on their line if you are unrepresented.
Right.
When you walk through the property, they are going to probably have you sign in. Most agents do an open house to get business.
Right.
Most people coming to an open house can't afford the house they're looking at. They usually can afford somewhere between 5 and 10% less than that house. Most people dream when they go out unrepresented,
right?
Because they think they want this. This is what they, this fits the bill, but it's normally right out of their price point. So the objective of that realtor is to sign you on at the open house.
Right.
Now, why I think this is a fabulous question: if you decide to purchase that home, there are new laws that affect your potential ability to hire a different realtor.
Oh.
Right. And so
it's not so straightforward then, is what you're saying is if I go to like an open house for one of your houses.
And then try to pull me in after the fact, where if you go to the open house before we have a BBA and then say, hey, Laura, I want you to write an offer on this property for me, there can be some gray for me as a realtor. Okay. And dual agency, where the listing agent represents both sides, is truly going away. Because the new law states that I have to negotiate my salary from that seller today when I sit down with them to write the listing agreement.
Right.
And so if you come in unrepresented, I can't tell the seller they have to pay me to represent you now.
Right.
Because I've already negotiated the 3% and that's all they're going to be able to pay me. Now, there are some things that you can do if everybody agrees, right? And so I think some of this gray is going to go away. But if you do go to an open house without your realtor, my suggestion is to know who you're going to hire and start having that conversation. Because if you go to an open house without a realtor and they ask for your information, and you put yours on that piece of paper, they're not going to allow their seller to pay your buyer agent compensation.
Right.
If you go to an open house without a realtor and you put your realtor's name down, I'm represented, I just showed up. That's the point of an open house, right? You're protected.
Sweet.
Yeah. So just make sure if you go, you are protected because you know somebody who is going to represent you, and you can communicate that at the open house.
Right.
Otherwise, you may be on the hook for paying for your own agent compensation, which is not a big deal. We're worth it. Like, I'm not saying don't, right? It's totally an option. But it's way better if you can get the seller to pay for it.
Sweet.
And so that's just kind of an error on the side of caution.
There are new laws.
We should do like a whole podcast on the new laws, because it's a really good information for buyers and for sellers as well. I'll say this in the end, but as a seller, you used to pre-negotiate the buyer's agent's compensation before you ever listed your property and knew what the offer they were going to submit to you looks like. Do not sign a listing agreement where you have committed to pay anything to the buyer's agent. It's no longer part of the Georgia GAR contracts. It is, but there's other options. So make
Right.
sure you're reviewing with your realtor what your options are on the listing and buy side.
Yeah, that's a lot to keep up with.
CE classes.
Right. That's why you hire a realtor. Well, thanks for joining us today on Spill the Tea with Laura and Dee. And as always, if you thought this was helpful and or entertaining, hit heart and or send a friend. Also, if you have any questions for a house flipper or a real estate professional, drop a note below and we'll answer them in an upcoming video.
Peace.
Peace.
This is light work. Come on, spill the tea. Yeah. Ooh.